beautiful till it all burns out. We're like falling stars, miracles dancing on the ground. And we're right with you to feel it stride deep dive. We're right with you, yeah. And we're right with you to feel it stride deep dive. Suffering grows, yeah. Let's say that life is beautiful. Would you let me in? No, yeah. Let's say that life is beautiful. Would you let me in? No, yeah.
Hello, everyone. I have a special guest here with me. This is Bill. Bill is a patent attorney and he's also an electrical engineer. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Julia.
Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me this evening.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of your cool, legendary stuff you've been a part of, just like the cloning gun. You want to tell them about that?
Sure. So I basically am an electrical engineer, went to school in this amazing place called South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. We've all heard of it, I'm sure, and became an electrical engineer. Came out of that, worked for about 15 years as an engineer, and then decided to go to law school. My first job out of law school, I worked for California's largest patent firm, and they were on the case that dealt with transgenic corn. So this was the first case that tried to determine who had invented transgenic corn. So can I describe what transgenic corn is?
Please.
Okay. So going back decades and decades ago, farmers had figured out that a bacteria, a very common safe bacteria called Bacillus thuringiensis, which I'll say BT from now on because I don't want to say that over and over. But this BT gene is very, very safe. And when applied to corn plants, it would kill corn worms, corn borers, which were a devastating pest to corn. So later on, as companies got better and better at modifying genes, they decided, wouldn't it be cool if we took that poison that is made by the worm and had the corn plant actually make that poison and put it in the roots for the worms to eat, and then it would kill them. And that's what they did, is they figured out how to take the poison gene out of BT and insert it into the genome of corn plants. So when the corn plant is stressed, it produces poison and kills the worm. So somewhat interesting the way they did this back, now if we were doing this, we would use CRISPR. Maybe some of you have heard of that, which is this automated tool for taking genes from one place and putting them into another place. Well, back
Baby.
there you go. Back then, it wasn't nearly as sophisticated. So they used this thing called a gene gun, which literally was a square box about the size of a big, big suitcase. And it had a thing that you could put a 22 bullet into, and you'd hit it with a hammer. At the end of the bullet, you'd put a little paste of the BT gene goop. You'd hit this, it would drive it through this little teeny tiny hole and spray the genes into this pan of corn seeds. And then you would grow the corn seeds and see which one of them got affected. So yeah, I actually got to go to the trial and actually got to touch and feel the gene gun. Actually pretty cool. So anyway, that was my first experience doing a court case, and it was on BT corn, which is in probably 80% of the corn that we currently eat today currently has the BT gene in it.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I learned something from Bill that was very, of course, it interests me. It was the fact that there is like one judge that presided over all of the water, like anything water in America. Can you just explain how they're?
Yeah, so now we've moved forward a few years. So that was my first job as a lawyer out of college. A little later on, got involved in a court case dealing with oil well fracking. So it was actually a tool that was used at the oil well head to take the extreme pressures from these fracking trucks and safely get it into the well so they could break up the rock. And so there was a patent on that particular tool that did this, just a big chunk of metal shaped a particular way, but it was actually pretty darn cool. Anyway, we represented the patent owner, and we were suing a company and suing them in Fresno, California. And so we would go up there. The case lasted almost 3 years, and we would go up there every 2 or 3 months and be in front of this judge. Well, the judge at the time was the busiest federal judge in the entire United States. He had a docket of over 600 cases. You may or may not be aware of this, but like in state courts, you will have family courts and immigration courts, and you'll have civil courts, and you'll have criminal courts. Judges kind of specialize in what they do. Not so in federal courts. In federal courts, the judges hear everything. So this same judge was hearing immigration cases, drug cases, child abuse cases, patent cases, basically everything that they would hear. So we were there as a civil case, which is, parties that are just fighting over money. And it was interesting is that we'd be sitting there arguing about our little money patent case, and you'd hear some noises off to the side, and the judge would go, okay, we're going to have to take a little break here because a criminal is ready for sentencing. And then we would all have to stand down and just kind of sit there and wait to bring these people in and then go through some of the most horrendous, tear-jerking stories as these people were getting sentenced to life imprisonment. And we're sitting there going, we're just here for a stupid patent case. And, please stop this. So anyway, so the other thing that this judge was noted for is that he basically controlled the water flow in the Western United States. So again, same thing. We'd be sitting there doing our little patent thing, and the judge would go, okay, we've got to take a little break here. I've got to take this call. And these calls would come in. We would all listen to it on the speaker system. There would be 30, 40, 60, 80, 90 people on these calls. And there would be lawyers representing the salmon fishermen. There'd be people representing the farmers. There'd be people representing the environmental groups. So
and this isn't just California; it's across the country.
Across the country, a big deal during the time when we were there was the salmon up in the Northwest. Because if the water in the river, and I learned this because I was just sitting there with nothing else to do but listen to these calls, if the water gets over like 71 degrees, then you completely kill all the eggs and you don't have a salmon, run the next year. So you would get these calls, like these emergency calls, and someone would come up and go, the water just hit 70 degrees and we need to release water, cold water, or this is going to kill next year's salmon. And then they would have these arguments between the various stakeholders in that water. And this guy on the fly would just kind of go, release the gates. We're going to release X million of gallons of water. You'll check back with me tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and let me know what the temperature is, and we'll release more if we need to. And then we'd go back to our little patent case. It was just really fascinating.
Which can you explain how some of the rights of the water, how it works with who put their thing in first and when it rains and all of that?
Yeah, so I've never quite heard it put that way, who put the thing in first. Yeah, but it's interesting in water law is the water law on the eastern half of the United States, which is divided by the Mississippi. So if you're on the east side of the Mississippi, there is one set of laws that control water. If you're on the west side, there's another set. So if you're on the East Coast and you are a mile away from a river and you put your pipe in there and you start pulling water out, you've got a right to use that. But if someone happens to set up shop like right on the riverbank and starts pulling water out, well, their right is prior to yours, has a priority to yours. So it's who's closest to the source basically wins on the East Coast.
On the right side.
And again, by the way, I'm really, really simplifying this. It gets a little more complicated, and I'm not a water attorney, so please don't go to the East Coast and put your pipe in the. So, but on the West, it's like who got there first. And so if you get there first and start pulling water out, and someone gets there second and starts pulling water out, if there's a drought, then their pipeline gets shut off first before yours. And this actually happens every single day in California. Every gate, on these canals they have that feed the farmers, they are numbered. And as the drought continues, as it gets drier and drier and drier, the state runs around and closes the gate from the people that have the lowest priority.
So they run the gates.
Yep.
But there are private people that own the water, but they don't decide. The state decides what happens to it.
The ownership of the water is a difficult question for me to answer, but but there is a state law defines who gets priority to the water. When you talk about ownership of water, that gets to an area that I can't talk about. I just don't know.
They're fighting over the Colorado River.
Oh yeah, no, the Colorado River is the biggest example of fighting over water that is dwindling. So first of all, when they started divvying up the Colorado River, they did so looking at this was back approximately 1930. Don't hold me on these dates, but approximately 1930. They figured out how much water was coming down the Colorado River, and they started to divvy it up. This amount was going to go to California. This amount was going to go to Utah. This amount was going to go to Arizona. The thing is, those 5 years they used as their template were just massive years that had just never been seen before or again on the amount of water that was going into Colorado. So when they allocated X million acre feet to California, they were doing it on an inflated amount of water that just wasn't real. Then it didn't matter because nobody was using that much water. But fast forward 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, now the water supply is dwindling and the states are starting to fight over this. So California has some of the premier priority rights to the Colorado River. So a state like upstream from us, would that be like Utah, they have to watch this water flow by their state because California actually has a right to it. They don't get to pull the water out. And so over the past 2 years, there have been massive lawsuits, a lot of negotiation trying to readjust the assessment of the Colorado River water. It's a huge problem because here in Southern California, we get 40%, 50% of our water from Colorado River, 30, 40% from up north. Again, don't hold me to the numbers, but it's a large percentage of our water comes from either Colorado or from the Sierra Nevadas.
That's really interesting. So out of all the things that you did, what was like your favorite patent or that you wish, like, how do you feel about out of all the amazing inventions and everything that you've been, involved in?
I am noted for not being able to do a short answer, so I'll answer that in two parts. Number one, what has been my favorite litigation? Because my career basically as an attorney divided into thirds. A third of the time I wrote patents. I still write a few, but I wrote patents, and a third of the time I worked for a very large company as their chief IP counsel, and about a third of the time I've done litigation. My favorite litigation this was actually in 2019 in December down in San Diego. We represented a small company that was building surf wave machines. Those things that are on the boats, the people get these standing waves and they surf on. I've never been on one, but I've seen a lot of videos of them. But so this was a patent case. There was this big giant company out of Canada that owned a patent on certain parts of wave technology, and they sued this company in San Diego trying to shut them down. And this was all about a little tiny piece of this. These are like $1 million machines. And there was this little teeny tiny piece at the very end where the wave shoots out to kind of help form the shape of the wave, which is very important. And they were suing on that. Anyway, we ended up winning that case for them. And that was the most fun to do. They were just a great client, a lot of fun people. And plus I love San Diego. So. Can I tell you one quick story about that? Okay. Yeah. So I learned a lot about litigation too. I mean, this was probably the 6th or 7th trial I had done. So anyway, we were in this trial, and the other side, they are a big company. They got a lot of resources, a lot of money. They got a ton of attorneys at their table, support people, AV people, all these people at their table. On our side, we got 3, me, my managing partner, my paralegal. That's it. So when they would get up and do their presentations, it was just a thing of magic. Like they would get up, and I will never forget their guy that ran their audio visual. His name was Gary. So if you were up doing a direct examination, you'd go, Gary, pull up document 14. Whoosh, 3D just shows up on the screen. Flip to page 17. Flip, 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 flip. Up here come the page. Show us an explosion of paragraph 6. Whoosh, with sound effects. It was great. Sorry, I hit the microphone. I get a little too excited about this. And we highlight that third sentence for us. It would highlighted just like sparkly colors. It was just like a thing of magic. And the jury was just like looking at it going like, wow, this is so cool. We were looking at it going like, wow, this is so cool. So when we got up, our technology wasn't quite as good. So it'd be like, can you pull up document 14? Circle, 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 spin, 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 spin. It would come up. Go to page 14. Scroll, 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 scroll. Paragraph 6. Scroll, 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 scroll. Highlight the second one. Scribble in with yellow. And the funny thing is, the jury laughed. The first time that happened,
Really?
the jury laughed. Not at us, but it was this laugh of like, oh, we see what's going on here. And from that point forward, we gained so much credibility by just being who we are. So they brought a budget and a lot of people and the coolest experts, but we just brought heart and humanity. And we ended up winning on every single issue in the case.
I love
So that was really cool.
I love that message. Heart and humanity wins. And like they say, you know, you hear a lot like love is the highest frequency, but it's actually like what's even above that is just being authentic, like being like your true self and being who and what you are. So I love that message. Is there any other ones that?
Well, let me finish that one a little bit because we actually, that case had been going on for 3 or 4 years and we didn't get involved with it until 5 weeks before trial, 4 weeks before trial. So imagine walking into a case that has massive amounts of documents, witnesses, and now trying to figure all this out. And you're up against this gigantic law firm. And everyone was telling us, you should like get this thing delayed 6 months so you can get caught up. It was like, no, we've got a good story to tell. We've got good, honest clients, and these guys are not treating us well. We're just going to go tell the story. And I tell you, we just went there and from our heart, just told the story. So many times I'm standing in front of the jury and I'm just being me. And it was so cool. So that really taught me a lot about what it means to actually connect to a jury. And it was really, really powerful. And my managing partner, by the way, is just a god at doing this. It's so,
I
so
love
cool.
it. Like him and his managing partner, like he is Bill is very logical and like like it's like you know, in the mind, and his partner is very like intuitive, like, you know, totally like it's like it reminds me of like the head and the heart coming together or the right and the left brain coming together. What makes him like is such a dynamic duo.
Or the head of the horse and the other part. Can I tell one more story? This is a different litigation. And again, that's a very good point because my managing partner and me are very different. He has the best intuition I've ever seen in any person. He just knows how people are going to react. I lack that. And I just don't have it. I wish I had it. I don't have it, but I also have a sense of logic that he doesn't have quite that grasp of. So we make a really, really good team. To give you an example of that, there was a time, a litigation we were in, and my managing partner was doing this cross-examination, and the magic of cross-examination is never asking one too many questions, knowing when to stop. You know, when have you gotten what you need to win? Because once you go to that next step and push them a little bit too far, the witness is going to go, oh, I shouldn't have said that. And then they backtrack all their stuff. Well, this guy is a genius. He's just like I said, got this intuition.
Timing wizard.
Yeah, he just does it. Well, he got this witness to admit that he had falsified some statements earlier in his testimony. I actually didn't see that. But you said you saw that. No, I didn't really see that, but it probably was there. But you didn't see it. No, I didn't see it. Okay, so unbelievably powerful testimony. So he and I do the openings and closings. I love doing PowerPoints, and so I do PowerPoints, and he, of course, is the person going to present it, so he has to agree with all of the things that we're doing. So we're sitting there trying to put this together, and he goes, so there's this one slide dealing with this witness, and he goes, okay, on this slide, I want to say very, very simply, this person is a liar. And I'm going, you can't do that. I mean, that's beyond argumentative. It's going to cause the other side to be able to jump up and go objection. It's going to cause a sidebar. We're going to lose all this momentum. We are winning in this case, so why risk it? And he doesn't do this very often, but he said, I'm the managing partner. We're going to do it. So the next day, we've got the slide deck with that slide in there, of course, and we're going through the presentation. It's going good. The juries, I'm kind of glancing over there, and they're just nodding their heads, and it's like, it's going so great. And then this slide comes up. He actually stops, puts the slide up. He stands to the side and looks at opposing counsel, just kind of with this look of like, you going to object or not? He didn't say that, but he's kind of looking at him like, and they didn't move a muscle. They just looked straight forward. Did not object. And he goes, okay. That gentleman lied to you. He lied to me. He lied to the court. He's wasted your time. He's wasted my time. And it was just brilliant. I can't reproduce it, but it was just brilliant what he did. And yeah, we won everything. We got everything we asked for in that case.
Oh my gosh, Bill. I love that. So the reason why I asked Bill here is, okay, so this is actually, okay, so I came across this on the AI page. It says Game of Thrones author among 17 suing ChatGPT maker OpenAI for mass theft. You see, so I saw that. So my response to that, like I made a comment, I was like, said by the guy who totally copied a previous book. So people were like, what are you talking about? Can you elaborate on that? So I had said, like, look up the book, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. That's the original book he copied. So I was like, you know, a lot of people don't know about this, you know, and a lot of people want to know how I knew things were going to happen in Game of Thrones. But the original book, so I invited Bill here because I was going to go over these similarities between George R.R. Martin is the guy that did, that wrote the book that Game of Thrones is based off of. So there's so many similarities. So I wanted to go over it, and I thought it would be great to have Bill here, so, you know, because of the copyright of the, you know, to have like a legal perspective over some of these things. So Bill is hearing this the first time. So I'm just going to go over the similarities, and, you know, you tell me what you think. But so first of all, so the writer of this Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series is Tad Williams. And he's even given him props. Like George has given Tad props that, yes, he read it and was impressed by him, and that there was imitators that followed. And he said he read the Dragon Bone Chair and said, my God, they can do something with this form. And it's Tad doing it. It's one of my favorite fantasy series, he said. But listen to these similarities. So there's a highborn girl named Maria, disguises herself as a boy and learns to fight with a sword as she travels throughout the lands. Okay, so in both Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and A Song of Fire and Ice, a young noble girl called either... It's Maria in Tad's, and then it's Arya in George's, flees her home, traveling in disguise as a boy. Despite the fact that many people see through her, you know, her disguise, she keeps wearing it. George R.R. Martin naming of Arya is clearly an homage to the original cross-dressing noble girl Maria from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. So there's that one. Mari, like they didn't even really just added an M to her name. On her journey, the girl in disguise. So, okay. So meets many characters, including a man wearing a helmet shaped like a hound's head who is sent to bring her back to the king. And Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, this hound helmeted character is named Ingen Jagger. And George R.R. Martin's, his name is Sandor Clegane. In both cases, these men are skilled warriors who manage to escape death on multiple occasions. So there's that. Two princely brothers who hate each other fight over the royal throne after the death of the old king. The country is torn apart as various factions choose sides. So in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, the princes are named Elias and Joshua. In Fire and Ice, the feuding brothers are named Stannis and Renly Baratheon. So there's another similarity. A red-robed advisor to the new king convinces the king that he needs to sacrifice his hated younger brother. This blood sacrifice, the red-robed advisor says, will make the kingdom like whole once more. In Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, this red-robed advisor is named Pyretes, and Fire and Ice, her name is Melisandre. In both series, these red-robed priests slowly convince their respective royal masters to allow them to practice a strange fire ritual, which will allow them victory. This fire ritual requires royal blood in order to be successful. So far, Bill, are you seeing any similarity? Like how much does this matter? Or how does that work with certain changes?
A little legal disclaimer here. I'm not a copyright attorney. I've done a fair number of copyright cases and have done several copyright registrations. So my knowledge of this is patent law. I'm pretty good. Trademark law, pretty good. This is a little weaker for me. So please take everything I say with a grain of salt.
This is not legal advice.
This is not legal advice. But that being said, let me talk for a bit. And again, no short answers. Okay. So the thing with copyright law is, well, let's just even take a step back from that. The backdrop rule in the United States is everyone is free to copy everything else unless you can find an IP protection to tack onto it. So you're free to copy anything unless you can find something that's defined as a trade secret, a patent, a copyright, or a trademark. If you don't fall into, there we go, those four buckets, then it's open for everyone to use. Now, when you get into copyright law itself, then they start looking at a work and they start trying to find what are the nuggets that make this work copyrightable. Because every work, like a story, is going to have things that are copyrightable and things that are not copyrightable.
And I'm trying to apply this too to the fact that he's literally taking action to, that George R. R. Martin's suing ChatGPT, like OpenAI for mass theft. So I'm trying to apply what you're saying to AI, like this, because there's so much new.
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly what you're doing is one of the things that you can't protect in your work are things that everyone has been doing for 30 years. So if everyone has been putting horses riding over the mountains, you're not going to be able to protect horses riding over the mountains. I mean, that's just something that is a part of a standard story. So if he's trying to make the argument that, look, all these things are things that ChatGPT has stolen from me, well, then maybe that same logic should apply back to what he's done here too.
Right.
So again, law tends to be, hopefully, fairly symmetrical. If you take a position, my hands aren't there. I can't talk about that. If you take a position over here, you're restricted from taking position over here if it's contrary to that. So in something like this, you would look at certain story elements about characters and what they were doing and how they were interacting and say, are those things that have been around for a long time, or is this truly created?
A cross-dressing girl that disguises herself as a boy and has Arya in her name. Like,
in a non-legal opinion, that's pretty darn specific. So, yeah. So the other thing that they pull out are what they call savoir-faire, which are just things that you have to make the story work. You have to have a background. You have to have a floor. You have to have grass. You have to have huts. You have houses. None of those things would be protectable. Then they look at the story. They try to pull out the nuggets of what makes the story effective. Here, and that's why you have juries, because you would go to a jury and say, here's the story. Is the fact that this is a cross-dressing woman doing what she's doing, is that central to the story? Is that a nugget that needs to be protected? If you were on the jury, obviously you would say yes. That's why we have a jury system, because those are the kind of questions of fact that have to be determined by the trier of fact. Are these things that are important? Are they nuggets? And then you need to look and say, did they actually copy it? And copying has two components. One, did you have access to the prior work? And number two, was there a substantial similarity with the prior work? So kind of like the first thing you do is you look and see, what are the nuggets of the story that where their protection could apply, and then you look and see, did they have access to those nuggets, and is there substantial similarity with the new one? That's my general understanding of how you do the test and copyright law.
So here's a few more of them. A tailed star, okay, appears in the sky, portending doom and change. And Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, this tailed star is called the Conqueror Star, or Saastrian Conquid. How do you say that? Conquides? Conquides? I don't know how to say that. Okay, and it appears in the sky for 3 years after an absence of 497 years. And Fire and Ice, this star is called Shirikuya, the dragon's tail, or the red comet. So a tailed star coming in basically in both of them. Okay, so the feuding brothers, named Elias and Elias and Joshua, appear in the story. And a not so subtle nudge in Tad Williams' direction, author George Martin names 2 feuding background characters, Elias and Joshua, in a tribute to one of his favorite fantasy series, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, which features the feuding brothers, Elias and Joshua, or Joshua. In an even less subtle nod, these 2 feuding brothers are said to be the sons of Lord Willem. These 3 characters are mentioned in chapter 22 of A Clash of the Kings, the 2nd volume of Fire and Ice. So A Song of Fire and Ice. So so he's doing this in a node to this book, saying, "Oh, it's an honor, like it's like respectful." That just that blows my mind.
There seems to be a lot of low-level similarity.
Yeah, okay. So the next one, okay, this is pretty obvious. Strange otherworldly icy creatures who live in the far north appear, and although they've been inactive for centuries, they plot to take over the mortal world. Their ruler is called the Night King and Storm King. So they've been exiled at the northern edge of the world for so many years, but the Night King, Storm King plots to soon take it all back, displacing mankind. So in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, these icy creatures are the Norns. And then in George R. Martin, they're known as the Others. But the fact that one of them called, like the dude is called Night King in one, and then in the original one, he's called Storm King. And they both have like the little creature, the people around it. Okay, so that's another one. Another one is they keep talking about how this like unusual winter is coming and it's going to last a really long time. And at the same time that happens, there's going to be this like otherworldly invasion from the north. Only the northern farmers in rural areas take these old legends seriously. So everyone else laughs and doesn't really take it serious. It's such absurd tales, but the people of the north don't forget. So that is the same in like both books. An unusual throne lies at the center of the human dispute for the kingdom, but it's only a distraction for the real conflict. In Tad's, this throne is named the Dragon Bone Chair, crafted by King John after he slaughtered the fire drake. And George R. Martin, it is the Iron Throne. And in both of the cases, the mortal kingdoms are so busy fighting one another that they fail to take notice of the eldritch powers rising in the north. So they're both like that. So they both have like this Iron Throne dragon chair. So a major noble character, a close relative of the king, loses his hand in battle. So that guy's name is, in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, is Joshua Lackhand. And Fire and Ice, the character is Sir Jaime Lannister. In both stories, the nobles lose their respective right hands. Not a foot, not a leg. They both lose their right hand.
His name was Lackhand. So.
And Lannister, I need a hand, sir. Okay, so a wolf plays a major role in the series. It's Sarenthone. It's the Grey Wolf, Kuntaka, Benebic's wolf companion, who is loyal to her friend, but a menace to all his enemies. In Fire and Ice, the dire wolves the Stark children discover in the first volume are named Ghost, Greywind, Lady, Nymeria, Nymeria, Shaggy Dog, and Summer. These canines are just as loyal to their masters as Kantaka is to Benebik. So there's the wolf in both of the stories. That was a dire wolf. Okay, a character that is the hand figures prominently. In Sorrow and Thorn, the prince's right hand is Sir Deonorth, and Prince Josua's right hand man. Early in Fire and Ice, the hand of the king is Lord Eddard Stark. Okay, so a slender sword named Needle.
See, that's probably a good example of one that I would not think, because that seems to be kings have right hand man.
Yeah, that's
That's more just a standard character because they're really not doing anything particular. But now, if you have to have a handless character that is a central actor, that is pretty darn specific. And now, if you look at are the actions they're taking, are they driving to the same resolution in the story? That's really, really specific. So, yeah, those are kind of suspect. Of course, we would have to take a step back and look and see when the original story was written and what kind of copyright protection would apply. Copyright protection is a little different than trademark and patent law. And the copyright gets changed a lot. It's basically changed on the whims of Congress, depending upon if you have a more Democratic Congress or a more Republican Congress. They will change copyright laws quite often. So you have to go back and look and see what were the laws in effect at the time that was created and the times it was published, and what steps did they have to do to keep it, in force while they went on. So it's actually a relatively complicated process to figure out who owns the copyright and what is the effect of that copyright in the original work.
So in both of them, there's a sword named Nadel, and it's wielded by a main character. So in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, the sword is named Nadel and is wielded by Prince Joshua Lackhand, who ends up lacking a hand. And then in Fire and Ice, the Needle's owner is Arya Stark. So, okay, a sword named Nadel. Everyone laughs at the idea of giants and otherworldly creatures in the north until they see it for themselves. In both series, the soft Southlanders eventually realize their folly after encounters with what Tyrion originally dismisses as legends of Grumpkins and Snarks, while in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, these legends are Pukas and Niskis. That's not really copying, because people are always going to say cute little names for not believing. Yeah, that's not much there. So young, noble children are cruelly thrust out into the cold, cruel world by evil adults. I mean, come on, that's like every story.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I'm not even going to. Okay, so a crown made to resemble antlers is worn by a king. The crown in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn appears on the brow of Enluki, the Storm King, while in Fire and Ice, the antlered crown is worn by Renly Baratheon. That's not. It'd be one thing if there was the Storm King and the Ice King, or Night King. Okay. A very short yet intelligent character has a betrothal as part of his storyline, but he is soon put on trial where the penalty is death, and everyone seems set on killing him, even his own lover.
That's starting to sound very, very specific.
Wait, so in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, this character is Benebik, and his betrothed is Sis Quinamuk. And in Fire and Ice, the character is Tyrion, and his betrothed is Shae.
Yeah, but I mean, you got a short, intelligent character that's betrothed, and he's in charge of something where he can be put to death. I mean, that is
a midget.
Pretty darn specific.
They didn't even make him. That's funny. Okay. The story begins shortly before the death of the old king, whose reign was peaceful and which kept the kingdom safe. The king brought peace and prosperity to the lands, and now his death has thrown the empire into conflict with both factions fighting. And Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, the old king is a non-Ageni. How do you say that?
I have no idea. Non-Agenian?
Non-Agenian King John Prebster of Werenstein, who brought the language of Westernly to his people as he united all the realms under one rule. And Fire and Ice, it's, Robert Baratheon, Lord of Westeros.
See, to me, that sounds like the way you start a lot of stories from the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries. You have a good king that passes away, and now the kingdom is thrown into turmoil, and there's going to be a battle to figure out who takes over. To me, that feels like something that is just a very common storyline.
Okay.
In contrast to many of others that are very, very specific.
Okay. The children of the Dawn Forest who once lived throughout the realm, but who are now living and hiding in the forests of the world, have a role in the story. And both the stories, both the children of the Dawn and the children of the forest, appear to be at odds with the otherworldly creatures in the far north. So one of them are called the children of the Dawn. One of them are called the children of the forest. And they're like warring with these different types of beings in the far north where it's cold.
Well, and something we should say that, even though there are some that are very strongly similar and there's some that are weakly similar, really you have to stand back and do a gestalt. You look at it and say, what is the overall effect? So if you have 500 things that are moderately the same, you could still infringe, or you could infringe if you had two things that are really spot on. So again, even though we're saying some of these things appear to be kind of loosely similar, still the aggregate of that is important.
Add it all up.
Yep.
Okay, so it's like point. Okay, we're almost done. This is so a character whose name is Snow, who is forced to journey into the north, is a main character. And Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, it's Simon Snowlock. And in Fire and Ice, it's Jon Snow. Snowlock.
Okay.
All right. A guilt-tormented knight spends years in exile in the south, only to return where he is at last revealed as still being alive. In Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, this is Sir Chimaris Sa Venida, while in Fire and Ice, it's Sir John Connington. So a knight spends years exiled in the south, only to return where he is at last revealed as still being alive. Oh, I loved that guy. I think it's the one. I think I remember that guy. Yeah, he shows up out of nowhere. Oh, I love that guy's face. They casted him so good. Okay, a major character lives thousands of miles from the rest of the other main characters for over 1,000 pages, having no real interaction with the main groups. But eventually, in both series, Daenerys / Tiamat interact with characters in the rest of the world. So they're saying like Tiamat and Tad Williams is like the Daenerys of that one. What do you think of that one? Thousands of years, they're thousands of miles, huh?
Again, it's one of those things that standing alone, it probably wouldn't be enough, but taken into context of the story, the similarity of names, the similarity of the strife, the similarity of the resolution of the story. Those are things that would become the look and feel of the story, and those are protectable. You can protect not only the literal names and features of a story, you can protect the overall look and feel. So who are the antagonists? Who are the heroes? What is the conflict? How is the conflict resolved? There becomes a point where those things become protectable.
This is it. I don't really understand it. The series was meant to be a trilogy, but got out of hand. Okay, so in the case of Memory, in the case of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, 3 volumes grew to 4, while in Fire and Ice, Song of Fire and Ice, it may eventually be 7 volumes. If author George R.R. Martin ever completes the series, Martin has humorously referred to both Williams's 4-book trilogy as his own 7-book trilogy. What is that? Can you translate that for me? Am I like, what?
He's clearly drawing a strong analogy between what he's doing and the way he's expanding the story.
At the same time, it's like, okay, there's formats to things like the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's hero journey. I mean, so many stories use that formula, but it's one thing to use a formula of like, oh, you have the protagonist, he goes on this thing and then this happens and then he overcomes and then he goes in the underworld, whatever, and is victorious. But it's one thing to use a formula, but this is like beyond. To me, this is beyond
Well,
than just a formula.
okay, you actually raise a whole nother area of copyright law, and that's your ability to be able to create derivative works. So what we're talking about here is there was an older book that has been, many of its pieces and parts seem to have been pulled over into a newer work. Okay, that's one type of copyright infringement. That's a literal infringement or infringing the look and feel. There's another kind of copyright infringement which says you've made a derivative work for something. So if you have a story and then you've taken some of the characters, some of the look and feel, now you've pulled it into a new story, but it's really just building off the old story. Well, that's still a copyright infringement, but it's a little bit different because it's called a derivative work.
Law.
So even, yeah. So lawyers. So even though like he's talking about, here's a story, he's kind of saying, I'm going to expand on this story. He's seeing that there's so much potential in the characters and the themes and the resolutions that he's seeing in this 3 or 4 volume book, that he can expand on that and he can build it into a more robust story. Well, those, even though they're new stories, even though they're new chapters, they still could be a copyright infringement because they're derived from the main work.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think we should all be inspired and like have inspiration, blah, blah, blah. But like when you're going to go after something for copyright and you are guilty of that yourself, that's where I was like, now hold on here. Because I mean, I've known about this for so long and I would talk about it. But I was like, oh, I don't know. There's a lot of people that don't know about it. But I have a question for you, Bill. Have you ever seen Phil Hartman's Caveman Lawyer sketches on Saturday Night Live?
Oh, years and years ago. Yes. Yeah. Not a long time ago.
Oh my God. It's so good. Oh God. I need to watch that.
Not as good as Will Ferrell, more cowbell, which is my favorite of all time.
His favorite sketch is more cowbell. We need more cowbell.
The Blue Oyster Cult. I love Blue Oyster Cult.
We should listen to that. Okay. Okay. A major young male character likes to climb his castle's walls and turrets and can do so with ease. Eventually, he'll be forced to leave his childhood home, no longer able to climb the castle's walls and turrets. In Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, this character is Simon Mooncalf climbing the walls of Hayholt Castle, while in Fire and Ice, it is Bran, oh my God, love him. Bran Stark climbing the walls of Winterfell, which was very significant. Okay, the same character who climbs castle walls is plagued by prophetic spooky dreams. These dreams appear to be a curse, as they usually do not reveal enough to be helpful. So both characters that climb and scale these walls of the castle are basically gifted seers. So, a new god, the Red God, demands blood sacrifice. His adherents are more than willing to do the Red God's bidding, no matter how awful the sacrifice is. Once blood is spilled, the spell is created and shadowy figures begin to appear.
Is that in both stories?
Yes.
Wow.
I don't remember a Red God being in the Game of Thrones series. There's the Lord of Light, but the girl, I don't know. I'm not so sure on that one. But okay, fierce people of nomadic grasslanders lives to the east of the world, and Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. These are the Three Things folk, while in Fire and Ice, they are called the Dothraki. In both cases, these warriors treat their women horribly and live in loosely knit clans where the leaders rule through barbaric acts. In both series, horses are treated better than the women of the clan who hold no power in the society.
Yeah, that just sounds like the 14th, 15th, 16th
Yeah.
centuries. But the next one is actually very, very specific.
Do you want to read that one?
Birds are used as messengers between intellectuals.
Oh, I love that.
They use sparrows sent between members of the League of the Shroll, while in the other story, members send messages via ravens. I mean, the fact that you've chosen ravens versus sparrows, but to me, that is extremely specific, is that you got smart people exchanging messages using birds. I mean,
Send it.
that's not something that I would think was a common theme in any books, at least
God, I wish I
I've
could
read.
send messages like that. You know, I'll use my white owls to be like, send this. This is an emergency. Drop this off. Okay. In both series, a battle takes place on a frozen lake. This is technically not yet. But
Battles on a lake.
okay, yeah. Both series, a girl strikes a blow to the otherworldly king of the north. In both respective series, Arya shoots, stabs the Storm King, Night King. So it was Arya stabs the Night King, and the other one it was Maria shoots the Storm King.
If that was central to the resolution of the conflict.
The entire story. We just, by the way, that was a spoiler alert. You want to read the last one?
Oh, that one's awfully long. I think you're up for it.
In both series, a young woman of royal blood has an advisor who falls in love with her as she tries to protect her people who are refugees fleeing war. In both series, the young woman slowly falls into madness after sending away her advisor who had fallen in love with her. In Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, the young woman is Princess Megwin of Hernister, who sees Count Elor. I'm sorry, guys, I'm butchering these names. Elair of Nad Mullock slowly fall in love with her. She sends him away and slowly falls into madness. Sounds like my life. No, I'm just kidding. Not at all. Not at all. Okay, so Fire and Ice, the young woman is Daenerys of House Targaryen, whose advisor, Ser Jorah Mormont, falls in love with her. She eventually sends him away, and then, at least according to the TV series, falls into madness. So that concludes it, Bill. What is your final professional, non-legal advice opinion?
To me, this is a lot like when you're looking at the Pygmalion and then My Fair Lady. They are stories that tell that have conflict, that have characters, that have resolution, that are very, very similar. The fact that you take and you rename the characters, you replace the setting, it is the same story. I mean, it really feels like it's the same story that's coming across. So this would be one that would be really, really interesting, first of all, to figure out what ownership rights does the person that wrote the story have. And then it would be up to a finder of fact, a jury, to figure out what are the nuggets and how similar are the nuggets. But yeah, it would be very, very interesting.
I mean, if you're in a case or you were arguing that or whatever, would you bring up, or how would you bring up, he makes two characters in a node to as a bow in honor of the original story. Like, he brings up that it was his, what did he call it? His 7-part series.
Yeah.
Like, that's how he refers to it. How would you present that?
Well, in pretty much every area of intellectual property law, there's a concept called willfulness. So I can accidentally trip into infringing your story. So let's say that that's probably not the truest statement ever, but I'll use patent law as an example because that I'm actually better. So if let's say you make an invention and you go off and get a patent, I go off and make something, I can still infringe your patent even though I know nothing about it. So I don't have to have knowledge of your patent in order to trip into it. However, in copyright law, let me take a step. But that would not be willful infringement. I just basically tripped in to infringing your patent. But let's say you sent me a copy of the patent and said, hey, I see that you've entered the market doing this and I've got a patent on this, and I continue doing it. Now that infringement becomes willful, and that means there are enhanced damages that kick in, enhanced money penalties that kick in for doing willfulness. So something similar here. If I have created a story and it happens to be similar to your story, and I had limited or no access to that, well, that's not willful. But if I had access to it and I've admitted access, which from what we said early on, he's admitted access, and then I've made them very, very similar, and I've actually kind of sort of bragged that I'm going to take that story and even extend upon it. I mean, that to me, if I was sitting as a juror in that case, I kind of go like, oh, this guy is I'll use the word non-repentant infringer, and I may be prone to give some additional damages.
Do you think he's No, that's just an opinion. I was gonna say, do you think like he just gave him a bunch of money?
I I can't go there. I would have no idea. I mean,
I like to see all surprise. Damn it. Yeah, no, I wonder
yeah.
if he did to like literally make such nods, and I don't know. That's pretty ballsy.
Well, and again, the one thing that we know nothing about sitting here is the ownership rights that the original author has. Because again, copyright law is kind of weird about when does copyright kick in, how strongly does it kick in. I mean, it is a weird law.
I do have another. I have a question for you. Are you able to explain the fluid, the fluid that's in that's used in crypto that they have to cool it in of what it's made up? Can you speak about that?
Oh, immersion cooling?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we are switching topics here.
Okay, yeah, sorry. We're pretty much done with the other one. I wanted everybody to conclude and come up with your own analysis. I thought it was so obvious. And because of him suing Chat GPT, that's when I was like, now hold on here. You are doing something that you've done. Like, so I was like, if he's doing that, I want to look into that. And so that is why I did that. And I wanted more people to be aware of that and learn about that. But that story is a great story. And the more stuff we find out about giants and this place, like dragons and stuff, I hope more people realize like what a fantasy we actually live in of this realm. But anyways, okay, so back to this really fascinates me, and I wanted Bill to speak about it. The cooling fluid that is in crypto, the
Yeah, so it actually it's a little bit broader than that. So, when you have electronic devices, especially powerful new modern electronic devices, they run really, really super hot. And so it's always been a problem. How do you cool those? It's been a problem for 50 years. How do you cool these electronic devices? So if you're familiar with data centers at all for big computers, you think of a room filled with computers, filled with air conditioners, and it's a 60-degree room and the wind's blowing and you're trying to keep these computers cooled. Well, running air conditioners is really, really super expensive. A few years back, they figured out a way to more efficiently cool computers. And this one, the first time I saw it, it just actually blew my mind. They take computers or other electronic device and they actually drop it into a vat of liquid. And so the first time you see that, it's just like those computers are sitting there in this tank of liquid operating. But this liquid is a dielectric fluid, very much like baby oil. So it very, very efficiently pulls the heat away from the computer. And then at times you can actually flow the fluid through the tank and cool that liquid. So you can keep these electronic equipment running so much cooler, cooling them in liquid. It is absolutely fantastic. Now, recently, you may be aware that people that do crypto mining, Bitcoin mining, it takes unbelievable power. And when I say unbelievable power, that means you're creating an unbelievable amount of heat running these things. And so many of these companies have moved to immersion cooling, where they take their tanks, big tanks, and these tanks, so they're like 20 feet long, 4 feet wide. They're filled with these computers just cranking along.
Wait, and there used to be only one company that made what they sit in, what the fluid sits in, but now there's like a bunch. Or?
There are a bunch of companies right now that deal with it. We're actually in a case on this that I can't really talk too much about, but no, but there are several companies out there that today offer solutions for cooling computer equipment inside tanks.
But the fluid, how did they develop that fluid?
Oh, you go back to the beginning of this technology. People, just normal people off the street that wanted to become Bitcoin miners, they would go buy themselves just a powerful computer. They would put it into a fish tank and flow baby fluid through it, or baby fluid, a baby oil through it.
And it worked.
And it worked because this stuff is dielectric. It doesn't harm the electronics. It doesn't conduct electricity. And it allows you, what's really, really super important when you get into crypto mining is making sure you're running your crypto miner as fast as possible. And so most computers run at a certain particular clock speed, like a gigahertz or 2 gigahertz. Well, when you put these things in oil and you cool them effectively, you can run them faster. That's called overclocking. So now I've invested a certain amount of money in a computer and I can run it 25% faster, meaning I've got a 25% better chance of winning the next Bitcoin.
Shout out to Dub Selector in the chat. He's my moderator. He works on like 14 quantum computers up in Santa Barbara area.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he was saying some things.
Well, the quantum isn't. Now, talk about cooling. We're talking about cooling down to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So, I mean, even our cooling in these tanks is still pretty darn warm. I mean, you stick your finger in these tanks, which you can do. I mean, if this stuff's safe, it feels like a warm bath water. If you're doing quantum computing, you're cooling down to within 1 degree, 2 degrees of absolute zero. That is cold. He would be better to answer that, but probably through some use of helium, use of liquid helium and expanding it. You can cool it down a lot because they actually have to take a quantum dot, and you actually have to take that quantum dot. It's one way of doing it, and slow the electrons down to where you can actually have control of the spin on individual electrons to do quantum computing.
Oh, wait. Okay. This is an interesting story. I'm going to mention it is like, okay, what a small world. I was in Iowa, or like Iowa, Minnesota, like borderline. And I went to go see this plastic surgeon about this laser for a nail. And I saw his last name and I was like, I feel like that's, Bill's relative. And so I go to the appointment and I talk to him and he comes in. And he walks in with the nurse and he's like, Julia, what do you do? And I was like, I said something. He's like, what do you really do? And I was like, remote viewing. And then he's like, what did you just say? So then we start having this like out there conversation that it was like a quantum conversation where like, bam, 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 like just the subjects that we were talking about. And then he brings up, because he's like, you don't know about Stanford. Like he starts talking about like this Stanford remote viewing thing and things he knew about it. And he's like, do you know what you're getting yourself into? And so then we just start having all these like divine conversations. And he tells me his son is a project manager on Artemis, the Artemis project. I was like, I was just stargazing the other night and I was looking at Artemis and we start talking. So then I mentioned like, hey, do you know? And I bring up Bill and he goes, what did you just say? And I was like, yeah, and so I make the connection. He goes, that's my cousin. He says, that's my cousin. And he was just mind blown. He's like, Julia, this is unlike any conversation I've ever had. Like we were talking about Boeing when I went and filmed at Boeing and crazy stuff. But what a small world that I had never been to the Midwest in my life. I'm out there for a few weeks. And of all people, I meet his cousin who was awesome and elevated and they're brilliant. And we were talking about welding and he was telling me about his welding equipment, but you really do have a brilliant bloodline there, Bill.
There's only like 50 of us. It's amazing. You went to Iowa and ran into my cousin. There's only like 50 of us that are related in the entire United States. It's pretty amazing.
I sensed it too before it happened. I was like, I just feel like this is feeling, but like, what a small world. Seriously.
I love the fact that Dub Selector is answering my question. It appears I at least didn't miss too far. Because again, he's saying big compressors use helium to drive these pumps. He gets down to close to absolute zero. So at least I was close. So, which is all I can do as a patent attorney at this point. So, but that's really cool stuff. Quantum computing is, give that 20 years, that's going to be pretty darn cool.
There's so many things I do want to ask you about, all kinds of patents. Maybe like another day, if you would come back and I could pick your brain.
Oh yeah, well, as you can tell, I just won't shut the hell up. So yeah, I'm okay being here anytime you want.
Well, thank you, Bill. I'm glad everybody got to meet you and hear what you have to say. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, you guys. Thanks for being here. I'll see you guys later. Just kidding. We're going to be here another hour. No.
Yeah. That will be one more question.
Watch the sun come up, beautiful, till it all burns burns out. We're like falling stars, miracles, dancing on the ground. And we're right with you to feel it shrouded deep dive. We're right with you, yeah. And we're right with you to feel it shrouded deep dive. Suffering grows, yeah. Listen, that life is beautiful.